Herr Günther geht. Bitte schön. Hello and welcome to our first high-level exchange panel of the Y7 Summit. My name is Clara Jamey, and together with my co-facilitator Sharon Maple, we will be hosting this discussion. We welcome you, Minister Lisa Paus, with us on stage, as well as our two co-chairs, Carolina Klaus and Benjamin Günther. It's nice to have you here. Before we start, let me introduce you a little bit to the Y7 process. The Y7 is one of 6 G7 engagement groups with the aim of making the voices of young people heard in the G7 process. And the drivers of this Y7 process are, of course, the delegates, the young people here. On Sunday, 48 young people from 11 states and the EU delegation have arrived, and they have been working intensively over the past 3 months in 5 tracks to create youth policy recommendations for the G7 heads of state and government. And they focused on the so-called tracks, which are linked to the main tracks of the G7 presidency, which are sustainable and green planet, economic transformation for shared progress, resilience of democracy, and global health and security. And these tracks were complemented by a 5th topic with a special focus on youth, peace and security due to the ongoing war in Ukraine. But the recommendations of the young people were much more holistic and comprehensive. For instance, topics such as gender equity as well as mental health were also discussed in the Y7 process and were incorporated into the track topics. So these profound and deliberative discussions reflect that youth policy is truly a holistic policy, and it shows that young people's needs are not limited to classical youth issues such as youth work, but much more than that. That is a quote by the chair. The discussions we had, the policy discussions, were guided by a great team of young track Sherpas, as well as by our 2 co-chairs, Benjamin and Carolina, who led the process in a very responsible position and significantly contributed to the advocacy work, as well as the exchange with relevant partners in the process. Ms. Paus, you have an academic background in political science and economics, and you were a member of the German Parliament for the Green Party since 2009. And you were also vice chair of the Green Parliamentary Group, responsible for topics such as finance, state budget, economy, labor, and social affairs. And now you were recently appointed as minister. As youth participation is an integral part of credible and sustainable policy making, it is truly an honor to have you here with us on stage to discuss some of the key priorities in the Y7 process posed by the delegates, and to show and to see your perspective as German Minister for Family Affairs, Senior Citizens, Women and Youth. So thank you very much for joining us on stage, and I would like to give you the word.
Vielen Dank. Thank you.
You can stay there if you like.
You can stay there. Oh.
Together with us on stage. That's more comfortable.
Well, as you maybe know, I'm now in office for almost 3 weeks. So my speech is still in German. So if you need some translation, just put on your headphone. First of all, I want to say it's a pleasure to me to be with you, and I really appreciate it to have this appointment today and to discuss with you and see what you have discussed already, so that everything which is in my power I can integrate in my work of my ministry. But of course you have, as you said, you have to say a lot to all topics of politics and not only the one my ministry is in charge of. So, liebe
dear
Y7 Jugenddelegierte,
Y7 youth delegates, dear Ms. Klaus, dear Mr. Günther,
liebe Track Sherpas,
dear track Sherpas,
liebe Frau Dreber,
Ms. Dreber,
Schlageter,
Mr. Schlageter,
Gäste.
dear guests.
Im Namen der Bundesregierung
In the name of the German government and the German presidency of the G7, I'd like to welcome you to the Youth Summit of the G7. This is the first Youth Summit of the G7 since the beginning of the corona pandemic, where we can actually meet in person.
the capital of Germany, as you know, but which is also my hometown, and I'm a deputy of the city of Berlin. So welcome to Berlin. Umso größer ist meine Freude.
The more happy I am to be able to welcome you in person and to see so many young and eager faces from 11 countries.
Es wurde schon gesagt,
Welcome. This week is the peak of your intense dialogue you've been having since March of this year, and voluntary work. You've spent many, many weekends, and you've worked over many time zones, and of course digitally. You have invested a lot of time, idea, and effort in order to be here and to conclude the work on your communique. This is great, and I'd like to thank you as the German Minister for Youth. The international cooperation is more important than ever today. This is a lesson learned from the global pandemic, from the global health crisis, and also from the global climate crisis, which concerns us all and already today is hitting millions of people severely. We can only master these crises together and in a multilateral way, and it's both about global social justice. When the 7 largest industrial nations of the world came together, and as these nations, we need to find answers to these challenges together with our partners from civil society. We also need to stand together when our value-based social order is threatened by wars of aggression and the right of the more aggressive. During the German presidency, we have taken a clear position against the Russian war of aggression in Ukraine, and we have acted decisively. And also this summit is against the background of the war, and you have a special track concerning how youth are affected by wars and by aggression, and how can young people contribute to peace and stability. You also show your solidarity because you have invited 4 delegates from Ukraine to participate in your deliberations. Dear delegates, dear guests, friendship and international cooperation are more necessary than ever today. This is why your commitment gives us so much hope for a more secure future and a more peaceful future for hopefully all people on our planet, just as the United Nations has planned with their Agenda 2030. This is why the G7 Youth Summits and your exchange with political decision makers, with me and hopefully many others, is so important. And I'm looking forward very much to talking to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. In a couple of minutes, we will start an open discussion, which will be led by the chairs first, Mrs. Klaus and Mr. Günther. But before we begin, we would like to take the opportunity to get some insights from you as delegates as well. And for that, we prepared a Slido beforehand, and you should have gained access to it. And we would like to invite you to answer the following question during the discussion. Based on your Youth7 experience and the exchange you had within your tracks, which issues would you like to highlight for Federal Minister Paus for her work? Again, you can post questions during the discussion, and afterwards we will open the discussion results, and my colleague Sharon will give us some insights in what you've posted. The discussion will be streamed, and we use written sign and language interpretation, so that also outside in the broadcast you can hear the stream in German as well. I now look forward to an interesting discussion, and I would like to hand over to Mr. Günther for our first question.
Thank you very much, Clara. And thank you, Madam Minister, once again for being here today with us. And as you can see, there's like a whole room filled with super excited people who are eager to meeting you here. And you've already mentioned it, that the topic of youth, peace and security is the topic that also got into this summit due to the war against Ukraine. So you will not be surprised that my first question is directed into that direction, because You know that in recent years the United Nations has adopted various resolutions on youth, peace and security. There are a number of resolutions by the United Nations Security Council on that. And in these resolutions, the outstanding role of young people in peace-building processes is emphasized and highlighted. So my question to you would be like, how does the federal government, or more specifically your ministry, work on implementing this youth, peace and security agenda, and do you consider that something like a national action plan to implement that, and that agenda might be a feasible way forward?
So first of all, we as the federal government support this. We also signed this, of course, and we feel committed to implementing what we have signed. And it's also important that as the Federal Republic of Germany looks at youth policy, we do have young people in Germany, even if we are an aging society, more so than others worldwide. So I think it's really about implementing this. We are already doing a lot since we've had our new government. For example, we'd like to lower the age for voting rights, and the European Union has implemented a new program which provides additional funding also for kindergartens and primary school. So here too we should teach and support participation for all children and youth. And we also like to support teachers in understanding that children must be involved more, must be able to participate. So we are going to strengthen that overall, because this is something we have seen in the context of the war against Ukraine. This is about defending democracy and liberty. Sadly, it's not only Russia. Russia now has attacked Ukraine in this war of aggression colliding with international law, but the authoritarian regimes worldwide have gained in power. We have rather more than less authoritarian regimes nowadays. This is something we all know. The more important it is that we strengthen the voices of young people and that we make them feel listened to. We make them feel like they can participate. This is good for every individual, but it's also extremely important to strengthen our democracy, because democracy is freedom. It supports justice. And this is why, when it comes to peace and security, it is so important that young people learn about freedom, that they learn to find a democratic discussion, to peaceful conflict resolution. These are skills you have to practice every day. And this is why everything that supports this is a good thing. So we're supporting this internationally, and we try and get a little better every day in Germany.
Minister, for replying to our first question. We're moving on to another topic area, and for that, Ms. Klaus, please, what's your question for the Minister?
Yes, thank you. It's an honor to have you here today. As we already heard, youth, peace and security is a very important topic for us, and so is mental health. So our colleagues from the UK last year have been quite successful adding mental health to the G7 leaders' communique. And mental health is an issue that concerns both children, young people, but also adults. But at the end, especially youth organizations deal with it. And that's why we'd like to know, to what extent does the Federal Ministry support formal and non-formal educational institutions in their effort to strengthen mental health services, on the one hand, and also what mechanisms ensure that, for example, schools and sports clubs are not left alone with this important and very large task?
Well, we have an established structure in place, including funding in this area, and we actually also have strengthened this due to Corona, for example, the COVID pandemic. We have a long-standing tradition in Germany regarding the voluntary structures. We have lots of associations, clubs, etc., and we have a well-developed support organization for children and youth with special offers for psychosocial support, and we have a support network if you need help. Of course, it's always possible to do more, and when it comes to COVID, we have noticed that it is still not sufficient and it is in part underfunded, but we do have a structure in place which is financed by the federal government and the local structures. However, the pandemic has created a special challenge for all of us because we had to go into lockdown. Sports activities, other activities were suspended, and this is why we've noticed that it's extremely important to get things going again now. So as a federal government, we have provided 2 extra billion euros for all these associations, telling them it's great that we have you, we are giving you the money to do something. And luckily we have these structures in place, so it was it was happening quite fast. And there are also special offers like phone lines, hotlines for psychosocial counseling, so people can get immediate relief and immediate support. You could make this also more familiar, because not all young people know about these offers. We're working on this, but we do have the basic structure in place. And we have noticed that the COVID pandemic has been a special challenge, which has created also an impulse, because it has kind of loosened the cohesion of our society structures, and we need to recreate these cohesional structures within society.
Of strengthening young people and giving them the possibility to participate in youth activities. And moving from that to our third question in the field of youth participation, Mr. Günther, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, and indeed, you've already dived into the topic of youth participation, and you've mentioned that we do have like a kind of traditional voluntary structure here in Germany. We have the Federal Youth Council also being involved here in terms of DNK and coping, like the Federal Youth Council and different other youth organizations like the sports youth, the political youth organizations who are very important and very active also in creating this entire summit here. So I think my next question goes into the direction, like what is the ministry, what is your ministry particularly able to do to ensure that the interests of young people are always heard and represented and taken into account on the political decision-making level, and then thinking a bit further onto the international level, going to the G7 states. You've seen that we tried to invite, or we managed to invite 4 countries which are not part of the 7. So how can we sort of expand our decision-making processes and include particularly the members of the Global South into active decision-making processes on the global level in a mandatory way, so that it's not just the West talking and also not just the Western youth talking, but we're taking the entire global perspective into that discourse?
That's actually a good question. As you know, we do have not only G7, we often and the United Nations on the other hand, and in between are the others. Tatsächlich gibt es ja auch eigentlich G20. Und auch das G20.
There's also G20, and the G20 is pending as well. And it is the case that as Germany we are thinking about it. We think about how to continue. The G20 has provided a very good service after the big world economic crisis in 2009 and 2010. because that was already clear that it was overdue, that not only the Western countries with Japan govern the world, but that it is relevant that everybody is on board for all relevant questions and that it has to be expanded. And for G20 we have the topic, of course, that, for example, Russia and China are on board, and with the current war it's not very easy. So that's why I assume that it will still take place, but the situation in Ukraine, the war of aggression, and Russia, they have changed a lot with regards to the question of how we deal with each other internationally. We have also experienced it with the vote in the Security Council, with the UN committee, to what extent the war of aggression is condemned or not, and how difficult it was for the one or the other country what stance to take. So that's why I said that the federal government commits to multilateralism. Nevertheless, the question is what it means in the specific situation. We are very interested in developing new participation formats. We approach different countries in different ways based on the current new situation. And of course, it's very reasonable that underneath the pure governmental level, it is distributed. But as far as I know, the current status quo is not the case yet, that the ready structure next to G7, 20, UN, that it's not clear yet, the structure. But I think also for you it's interesting to think about what would be a smart strategy for the federal government and the countries that are here now, because it's clear that the G7 will continue to be an important core, but the G7 on their own won't make it. We need changes. Other than that, oh, it's knocking. Somebody's knocking. Otherwise, there's something knocking. So I want to add one more aspect. So participation, I mentioned that. It has to start on the national level, and that's why it's important to us to talk about next to the classic aspects like age of a vote, and because of the risk of the democracy now and the strengthening of the participation, we now want to have a support law now that secures or strengthens by law to have legal support and funding programs for all democratic actions. So we have democracy in Germany that is more on the defense side of things, because we know how the Nazi history has brought darkness over the world. So we are a defensive democracy, and nevertheless it has been the case that for the active deployment for the democracy, it wasn't fully stipulated by law. And I think this is an important step. And if you are interested in it in details or anything like this, so that you can communicate it in your countries, then we are happily willing to do so, because it's really important to do so, strengthening democracy.
The role of as delegates also to be in contact with your states and also the ministries, and emphasizing the cooperation on international level, and also emphasizing the cooperation or the connection to the G20. We are also in close contact with the Y20 chair, so this is a nice connection to our discussions here as well. Thank you, Minister, and the chairs, of course, as well, for your insightful discussions. And this is the point where we already say goodbye to all the people watching the broadcast. Thank you very much for participating in this discussion here at the Y7 Summit. And if you are interested in more information regarding the policy discussions that the young people here had, you can visit the homepage www.y7germany.org, and there you will find the communiqué as soon as it is published, and you can follow the further process. Thank you again for watching, and see you soon.